The shotgun blast punched through the ceiling of Ali's diner at 2:17 in the morning, and the plaster came down like snow over cold coffee and half-eaten pie, and for one full second, the world inside that low-lit roadside building on the edge of the Mojave Desert simply stopped. Leah Danton had done a lot of stupid things in her 31 years on this earth. Nothing compared to this. Because in the back corner of that diner, in the big round booth that nobody ever sat in, because the vinyl was cracked and the table wobbled, four men had not moved, had not flinched, had not put down their coffee cups. And one of them, the oldest one, the one with gray at his temples and hands that looked like they had been used as tools for 40 years, was turning his coffee cup slowly on the table and watching her with an expression she could not immediately name. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something closer to the look a very experienced man gives a situation he has seen before in one form or another many times and is now waiting with absolute patience to see which version of it this particular night intends to be. Leah's hand tightened on the revolver. She had been awake for 43 hours. That was the thing nobody ever told you about desperation. It did not feel like a movie. It did not feel dramatic or sharp-edged or cinematic. It felt like a headache behind your left eye that had stopped throbbing because it had simply become the new baseline of existence. It felt like a stomach that had given up growling because it had stopped believing food was a realistic possibility. It felt like a hollow ringing in your ears that made everything sound like it was happening at the bottom of a lake, distant and slightly wrong. The world translated into a language that was almost English, but not quite. She had been awake for 43 hours, and she was standing in the middle of a diner in Barstow, California, with a cracked revolver in her hand and a bandana over her face, and the four men in the back booth still had not moved. 43 hours ago, the phone had rung. She had been under the chassis of a 2009 F-150 at Delray's Auto Shop, her back against the concrete floor, grease on her forearms up to the elbow, when her cell phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost didn't answer it. She had 3 more vehicles to get through before her shift ended, and Delray had been making noises about cutting her hours again, and the fluorescent light above Bay 3 had been flickering for 2 weeks, and nobody had fixed it, and the whole world had the particular quality of things that were almost, but not quite working. She answered it. Riverside Dialysis and Kidney Care Center. A woman's voice professional, careful the voice of someone who had made this kind of call many times and had learned to deliver bad news in a tone that was neither cold nor warm, but existed in a carefully maintained middle distance between the two. Clara Danton's account was 6 weeks past due. The outstanding balance was $4,200. The center's policy, the woman explained, required accounts in arrears of this duration to be reviewed for service continuation. If the balance was not addressed within 7 days, Clara's treatment schedule would need to be suspended pending financial resolution. Leah had stayed very still under the chassis of the F-150. She had asked the woman to repeat that. The woman had. Suspended pending financial resolution. Clara needed dialysis 3 times a week. Had needed it for 2 years since the kidneys that had been quietly failing her since her late 20s finally crossed the line they had been approaching for a long time. Without the machine, the toxins that the kidneys were supposed to filter simply accumulated. The timeline was not complicated. The timeline was not ambiguous. Without the machine, Clara would die. Not immediately, not dramatically. But within days, the symptoms would begin, and within weeks, it would become something that could not be reversed, and the woman on the phone was telling Leah that in 7 days, the machine would stop. $4,200. Leah made $11.40 an hour at Delray's. She worked between 22 and 28 hours a week because Delray had never offered her full-time, and she had never been able to make him, and her savings account had $47 in it, and her landlord had filed for eviction twice in the past 3 months and been talked back from the edge both times, and $4,200 was not a number that existed anywhere in her life. She had lain under the chassis of that truck for a long time after the call ended. Then she had gotten up, wiped her hands on a shop rag, finished the job, and driven home to her apartment on Crescent Street, where she had sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall and done the math 17 different ways and arrived at the same answer every single time. There was no answer. Cole Baxter had called her at 9 that night. Cole Baxter was 28 years old and had the particular quality of a man who had learned very early that charm was a survival skill and had been practicing it ever since. He had grown up 3 houses down from Leah on Denison Avenue, and they had known each other the way people know each other when they grow up in the same narrow circumstances, which was completely the way you know the texture of a wall you have been leaning against your entire life. He had a fast mouth and a faster brain, and he had spent most of those 28 years making decisions that looked brilliant for about 48 hours and then revealed themselves to be something else entirely. He was also, Leah knew, carrying a debt to a man named Fowler that had been accumulating interest of a non-financial variety for the past 3 months. She did not know the exact amount. She knew it was the kind of debt that came with a timeline that was not negotiable and consequences that were not financial. Cole had a plan. Ali's Diner on Interstate 40 east of Barstow. Tuesday night, almost nothing on the highway, maybe a cashier and a trucker sleeping over eggs. In and out, he said. 20 minutes. Nobody's going to be a hero. Leah said no. She said no again at 10:30. She said no a third time just after midnight, sitting on the edge of her bed in the dark, and meant it with everything she had. Then Clara called. It was 12:47 in the morning, and Clara's voice was the voice of someone who had been pretending for a long time and was very good at it. Warm and slightly too bright, the voice a person uses when they are trying to protect you from the weight they are carrying. She asked how Leah's day had been. She talked about a show she had been watching. She said she was feeling okay, which was Clara's way of saying she was not feeling okay, which Leah had learned to translate with the particular accuracy of someone who had been listening to the same person's voice her whole life. At the end of the call, almost as an afterthought, Clara said, "Don't worry about the center. I'll figure something out." She hung up before Leah could say anything. Leah sat in the dark for a long time. Then she called Cole back. The drive to Ali's Diner took 22 minutes on a highway that was nearly empty, the Mojave Desert spreading out on both sides of the Interstate 40 like something ancient and indifferent, the kind of landscape that did not care what you were about to do and would look exactly the same afterward. Cole drove. He always drove. Leah sat in the passenger seat of his 1997 Ford Ranger and held the revolver in her lap and looked at it with the focused attention of someone trying to understand a piece of equipment they had no real experience with. The revolver was a .38 special blue steel, older than both of them. Cole had gotten it from a man named Darcy who ran a pawn operation out of a storage unit off Highway 247, and it had cost them $60. And when Leah had examined it in the parking lot under the dome light of the Ranger, she had noticed a hairline fracture along the cylinder frame that she had chosen not to think about since. She had 3 rounds loaded. She had never fired it. She had never fired any gun. She had grown up in a house where there were no guns in a part of Barstow, where guns existed in a practical sense in the way that most things in that part of Barstow existed in a practical sense, which was as instruments of specific problems, not abstractions. She knew what a gun did. She had a reasonably clear understanding of the mechanics. But the specific muscle memory of holding one the way it sat in the hand, the particular weight of it, the way her thumb kept wanting to find a grip point that did not feel right, all of that was unfamiliar in a way she was trying not to examine too closely. Cole pulled the Ranger into the parking lot of Ali's Diner at 2:09 in the morning. The lot was mostly empty. 3 semis idling at the far end, their running lights orange in the dark. A Winnebago with a cracked rear window parked at an angle near the trash enclosure. And near the entrance, lined up with a neatness that had something deliberate about it, 4 motorcycles. Large ones. Chrome-detailed, heavy-frame, the kind of machines that were built not for speed, but for distance, for the long, straight roads of the American interior, for the kind of riding that was less about getting somewhere fast and more about the sustained fact of movement itself. Leah looked at them for a moment. She should have looked longer. "You ready?" Cole asked. "No," Leah said. "Too bad," Cole said and pulled his bandana up. The Mossberg came from behind the seat. Cole had test fired it 2 days ago behind a dry wash off Coolwater Canyon Road, and it had worked exactly as advertised, which was the only thing that had gone as planned in the last 72 hours. Leah pulled her own bandana up and looked at herself in the visor mirror. Two dark eyes above a faded cloth, the eyes of a woman who had not slept in 43 hours and was doing something she could not undo. She thought about Clara's voice on the phone. "Don't worry about the center. I'll figure something out." She got out of the truck. The night air hit her cold and dry, the Mojave at this hour, having released all the heat the day had put into it, the temperature somewhere in the low 40s, with a wind that came from the northwest and carried the smell of alkali and distance. She crossed the parking lot without looking at the motorcycles and pushed open the glass door of Allie's diner, and the warmth came out to meet her coffee and hash browns, and something faintly sweet underneath the smell that existed in every diner from California to the Carolinas, the smell of America not quite sleeping. Then Cole raised the Mossberg and fired into the ceiling. The blast was enormous in the enclosed space, enormous in a way that Leah had not fully anticipated, even though she had known it was coming, and the plaster came down, and the ringing in her ears became something total and absolute, and she was already moving because movement was the only option. Movement was what she had, forward and loud and fast, because the moment you stopped moving was the moment someone started thinking. On the ground, she shouted. Her voice came out harder than she expected, stripped of everything except the command itself. "Everyone down right now." Brenda Kowalski, 53 years old, 22 years at Allie's Diner, had been restocking the napkin holders when the door hit the wall and the gun went off. She screamed and dropped behind the counter with the practiced speed of a woman who had spent 2 decades in a roadside diner on an interstate highway and had developed certain reflexes accordingly. Her hands found the underside of the counter, and she pressed herself against the cabinet doors and breathed. At table 9 near the window, Warren Fitch woke from a dead sleep that had ambushed him somewhere between the meatloaf and the pharmaceutical brochures. His brain surfaced through the layers of exhaustion into a situation it could not immediately process, and it settled on the safest available response, which was to put his hands up very slowly, the way a man does when he is not entirely certain what the procedure is, but believes compliance is broadly advisable. Leah swept the revolver across the room, the woman behind the counter, the man with his hands up, the empty booths along the window wall, the dark back corner. Wait, the back corner was not empty. 4 men, sitting, not moving toward the floor, not putting their hands up, not reacting in any of the ways that Leah had anticipated in the rehearsed version of this, that she had run through in her mind during the 22-minute drive on the dark highway. They were simply sitting there, and one of them still had his coffee cup raised partway to his mouth, as though he had been interrupted mid-sip, and had not yet decided whether the interruption merited setting it down. "Hey," Leah shouted. Her voice cracked on the word. She hated that. I said on the floor, "All of you, now." None of them moved. The oldest one, the one with the gray temples and the coffee cup, looked at her. And she saw in the quality of that look something that her body understood before her mind caught up with it. The look was not defiant. It was not afraid. It was the look of a man who had walked into rooms containing danger often enough and long enough ago that he had stopped performing reactions to it and simply absorbed the information it offered and waited for the moment when the information became complete. He set his coffee cup down, slowly, with the kind of deliberateness that was itself a communication that said, "I am doing this because I choose to, not because you told me to." His name was Mike Callahan, and he was 56 years old, and he had been riding motorcycles since he was 17 and running his club for the last 11 years. And he had been in rooms like this one before. Not similar rooms, this exact room. The room where someone desperate stands between two futures and cannot see which door leads where. And he understood at a distance of 30 feet and in under 4 seconds what kind of room this was. The man beside him with the thick forearms and the beard and the scar along his left jaw was Bobby Gallagher, 49, who had been watching Leah since the moment she came through the door with the particular focused attention of a man who had learned over a very long time to treat unfamiliar situations as puzzles to be solved rather than threats to be reacted to. On Mike's other side, Declan Reed, 44, lean and still former Navy corpsman, 6 years of applied understanding of how human bodies worked and broke and could be redirected. He had not moved since the door opened. His hands were on the table. He was listening to something only he could hear, some internal calibration running constantly in the background, measuring distances and angles and the arithmetic of the room. And at the outside edge of the booth, Garrett Hayes, 51, with a jaw like quarried stone and eyes that moved even when everything else about him was absolutely motionless. Eyes that had been cataloging the room since before Leah walked in, every entrance and exit and table edge and foot of floor between himself and the two people with weapons, the way some men's eyes did things that other men's eyes could not, by long habit and longer practice. Bobby, Mike said quietly. He said it the way you say the name of someone you trust, completely without explanation or elaboration. Just the name and the expectation that what follows will be useful. 4, Bobby Gallagher said. His voice was low, conversational, as though he were commenting on the weather or the quality of the coffee. 2 active, 2 outside in the lot. Weapons 1, Mossberg pump action, 1 revolver. Frame crack on the cylinder visible when she came through the door. She's holding it with her thumb across the hammer. Hasn't cocked it manually. Doesn't know she needs to. The last part landed in Leah's chest like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples moved outward through her, and she heard herself say, "What did you just say?" And her voice had changed, had gone from command to something less certain, and she hated that too. Mike Callahan looked at her. "That revolver," he said, and his voice was something she had not expected from a man his size. In a situation like this one, it was unhurried. It was almost kind, the voice of a man saying something because it needed to be said, and not for any other reason. "That revolver is double action. You pull the trigger, it cocks and fires itself. But you've got your thumb resting over the hammer. The way you're holding it, if you pull that trigger, the hammer is going to catch your thumb on the way back, and the gun is going to misfire, and whatever happens after that is going to go very badly for you." Silence. Leah stared at him. "I'm not your enemy," Mike said. "I'm telling you the truth." "Shut up," Leah said. "Everybody shut up. Nobody moves." Cole had the register open. She could hear him from across the diner, the sound of bills being swept into the canvas bag they had brought. His voice low and urgent. "Come on, come on." And Brenda behind the counter saying, "I'm going, honey. I'm going," her voice carefully steady, in the way of someone who has decided that steadiness is the only useful tool available to her. Warren Fitch at table 9 had lowered himself from his chair to the floor. He was lying with his arms over his head and his eyes shut, and his pharmaceutical brochures had scattered from his open briefcase across the linoleum around him. Glossy pamphlets with smiling stock photo faces looking up at the fluorescent ceiling, and the sheer ordinary mundanity of them, the absolute prosaic irrelevance of them, in the middle of this hit, Leah somewhere between the ribs like a fist. "This is what you are doing," something inside her said. "You are doing this to people." She pushed it away. Could not afford it. Not now. Then Cole did something stupid. He left the register and walked toward the back booth and raised the Mossberg and set the barrel on the table edge directly in front of Mike Callahan's coffee cup. His voice had developed a thin, ragged quality that Leah recognized as the sound of a man who had realized the room was not behaving the way he had expected and was trying to compensate with escalation. "All 4 of you," Cole said. "On the ground right now. I'm not asking again." Mike Callahan looked at the barrel of the Mossberg the way a man looks at something he has seen many versions of over many years. He looked at it without alarm and without particular interest. Then he looked up at Cole. "You ever hunt?" Mike said. Cole blinked. "What, you ever go hunting?" "Deer, elk, anything like that." "I've got a 12 gauge pointed at your face," Cole said. "I know," Mike said. "So why aren't you scared?" Cole had no answer for that. Something moved behind his eyes that might have been the beginning of understanding. Then Declan Reed's hand came up from below the table. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. Declan Reed did not lunge. He did not shout. He moved with the absolute concentrated efficiency of someone who has reduced the distance between intention and execution to something approaching zero, who has practiced a specific set of motions so many times that they have ceased to be decisions and become simply what happens when certain conditions are met. His left hand found the barrel of the Mossberg and redirected it, not snatched, redirected upward and to the left, so that when Cole's finger tightened on the trigger by pure reflex, the second blast went into the ceiling, the second hole in the plaster of Allie's diner in the space of 5 minutes. His right arm came across the table in a motion that was too fast and too precise for Leah to fully follow. Cole went down. He went down hard, and the Mossberg skidded across the linoleum, and Cole Baxter, who had believed until approximately 4 seconds ago that he was the most dangerous person in the room, found himself face first on the floor with his arm at an angle it had never been designed to achieve, and the pain was white and total, and he could not remember how to form words. Leah spun. Cole. Garrett Hayes was already out of the booth. He had been out before Declan's hand cleared the table edge, moving not toward Leah, but around her, cutting the angle to the door because the door was where this ended or did not end. And a situation that stayed inside a diner was a different situation from one that moved into a parking lot and onto a highway in the dark. Put it down, Garrett said. He was 3 feet from her. She had the revolver up. Her hand was shaking. Her thumb was where Bobby had said it was. She could feel it now that he had named it, the wrongness of the grip, the small mechanical error that had been there the whole time without her knowing. I'll shoot, Leah said. I will. Don't come closer. I know you will, Garrett said. His voice was not cold. That was the thing she would remember about it later through everything that came after. Garrett Hayes' voice in that moment was not cold, and it was not a performance of calm, and it was not tactical. It was simply the voice of a man who was not pretending to be anything he was not. You might even hit me, he said, but that thumb is going to catch, and you're going to lose half a second, and I've got 3 feet of ground, and I've been awake longer than you, and it's not going to go the way you need it to go. Leah's chest was heaving. She could hear Cole on the floor making a sound that was not quite crying and not quite screaming, but lived somewhere in the territory between them. She could hear Brenda behind the counter saying something very quietly that might have been a prayer. She could hear the air conditioning kick on and Warren Fitch's pharmaceutical brochures rustle against the linoleum. And she could hear Mike Callahan's voice from the booth behind her, level and quiet as a carpenter's rule. It's over, he said. The only question now is what kind of over it's going to be. Leah stood there with a cracked revolver and 3 rounds and 43 hours without sleep, and a sister named Clara who had called at 12:47 in the morning and said, "Don't worry about the center, I'll figure something out." Garrett had not moved. He stood 3 feet away with his hands open at his sides and his weight balanced forward just slightly, and his eyes on her face reading her the way certain men read faces, not searching for weakness, but for information, for the specific data that told you what kind of person was standing in front of you and what they actually needed. He said, "What's your sister's name?" Leah stared at him. She hadn't said anything about a sister. She had said nothing in this diner about anything except get on the floor and don't move. And she had not said the word sister out loud in this building at any point in the last 6 minutes. What she said, "Your sister," Garrett said, "the one you came in here for. What's her name?" The question was so entirely outside the architecture of the moment that for 3 full seconds, Leah simply stood there with the revolver still up and her mind trying to locate an appropriate response and finding nothing. The question did not belong here. Nothing about it belonged here. And yet it had been asked with the same calm certainty as everything else Garrett Hayes had said tonight, the certainty of a man who believed the question was exactly right for the moment. Clara, Leah said. Her voice came out different than she expected. Smaller. Not commanding, not desperate, just the name itself stripped of everything that had surrounded it for the last 43 hours. Clara. Garrett nodded. The motion was small and unhurried. My mother's name was Ruth, he said. She was on dialysis for 6 years before she died. 3 times a week, exactly like you said. I know what that machine costs. I know what watching someone need it does to a person. The silence in Ali's diner was the particular silence that follows a statement that has changed the atmospheric pressure of a room. I'm not going to tell you that what you did tonight was right, Garrett continued, because it wasn't, and you already know that. I can see that you know that. But I understand how a person gets to the place you're standing in tonight. I understand what it does to you, what it takes away from you, what it makes look possible when nothing else does. Leah's arm lowered, not all the way. An inch, then another inch. Then help me, she said. The words came out before she could stop them, and they came out in a voice she had not used in a very long time. The voice underneath all the other voices, the one that existed before she had learned to sound like someone who had things managed. Young and afraid and out of ideas in a way that had nothing to do with age. Please, just help me figure out what to do, because I don't know anymore. I have tried and I don't know. Garrett Hayes looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his expression that was not pity and was not calculation. It was recognition. The recognition of a man who has stood on a particular kind of floor and knows its texture from the inside. Yeah, he said. Okay, let's start with the gun. And Leah Danton, 31 years old, who had driven 22 minutes across the Mojave Desert in the middle of the night with a cracked revolver in a canvas bag and a plan that had never been anything more than desperation, wearing the costume of a plan, slowly and carefully set the revolver on the nearest table. The crack in the cylinder made a small sound as it contacted the formica. Nobody in the room said anything. Outside, the desert wind moved through the parking lot, and the chains on the 4 motorcycles near the entrance shifted and clinked against each other, a sound like something being counted, and Leah's hand was still in the shape of holding something. Fingers slightly curved, and her brain needed 4 full seconds to understand what her body had just done. She had put it down. She had actually put it down. Cole was still on the floor. Leah looked at him. "Hey," she said, "talk to me." A sound came from the floor that was part groan and part word, and entirely Cole Baxter. "My arm," he managed. "I think my arm is broken." "Dislocated," Declan Reed said from the booth. He had settled back into his seat with the ease of a man who has resolved the situation he was concerned about and is now simply present. "Not broken. Hurts like broken. Isn't." Cole lifted his face from the linoleum. His bandana had come down around his chin, and his face was red and wet and angry. He looked at Declan. He looked at Leah. He looked at the Mossberg on the floor 11 feet away and did the math and came up short. "Don't," Leah said quietly. "I wasn't," Cole said. They both knew he was lying. He stayed on the floor. "Brenda," Mike Callahan said from the booth. Brenda Kowalski raised her head above the counter. Her mascara had run and her hands were flat on the counter surface, and she was breathing with the deliberate, controlled rhythm of a woman who had made a decision about what was going to keep her together and was honoring that decision. "You okay?" Mike asked. "I've been better," Brenda said. Then, almost despite herself in the way that a person sometimes finds something true coming out of their mouth before they have had time to evaluate it. "I've also been worse." Mike made a sound that might have been a laugh. "There's a first aid kit under the counter," he said. "You mind grabbing it?" Brenda looked at him, looked at Leah, looked at Cole on the floor. Then she reached under the counter and set the kit on top without another word. "Sit down," Mike said to Leah. "Not in order, the way you say it to someone who has been standing too long." Leah looked at the chair nearest to her. She sat down. And something about the simple physical fact of sitting, the ordinary human act of transferring weight to a chair, broke something open in her chest that had been held together with pure adrenaline for the last hour, and she put her face in her hands and breathed and did not cry, but came close enough that the difference was technical. "First time," Mike said. Leah looked up. "What, doing something like this?" Mike said, "First time." She nodded. "Thought so," he said, without contempt, without judgment, the way you note something observable about the weather. "You did everything wrong. Every single thing." "I know," Leah said. "You want to know the first thing you did wrong?" "Not really." "You picked a diner," Mike said. "You never rob a diner. A diner on an interstate at night is a truck stop that serves food. You know who stops at truck stops at 2 in the morning. People who drive alone for a living. People who are comfortable with long stretches of silence and the kind of waiting that makes certain men very good at recognizing when something is about to happen and responding to it before it does. You walk into a diner with a gun, you're not walking into a room full of people who don't know what to do. You're walking into a room full of people who spend their lives in the middle of unexpected things. Leah stared at him. You're telling me how to do it better. I'm telling you why it was always going to end this way, Mike said. So you understand it wasn't bad luck. It was the plan itself. The plan was the failure. Bobby Gallagher had gotten up from the booth and crouched beside Cole with the impersonal efficiency of a man diagnosing a mechanical problem. Rotate toward me, he said. Slow. Don't touch me, Cole said. Your choice, Bobby said. Hurts less if I help, but your choice. Cole stared at him. Bobby's face offered him nothing. No sympathy and no threat, just the patient expression of a man who was willing to wait as long as necessary. Pain and pride wrestled for a few seconds. Pain won. Fine, Cole said. Do it. Bobby worked quickly. There was a sound from Cole that he would have been embarrassed about if there had been any embarrassment left in him. Then Bobby said done, and Cole sat up and rotated his arm in slow disbelief. That's it, Cole said. It barely hurts. Told you, Bobby said, and went back to the booth. Cole sat on the linoleum and stared at his own hand opening and closing. Something moved across his face that was not quite gratitude and not quite understanding, but was the very beginning of both the first edge of a man starting to measure the room differently than he had measured it when he walked in. Leah Cole said quietly, What is happening right now, I genuinely don't know, Leah said. Mike Callahan reached into his jacket pocket. Leah tensed, old reflex useless now. What Mike produced was a phone. He looked at it for a moment, something scrolling behind his eyes that had nothing to do with the screen, and then he set it face down on the table and looked at Leah. Here's what's going to happen, he said. We're going to have a real conversation, not a version of one, a real one. And then some decisions are going to be made, and those decisions are going to determine a great deal about how the rest of your night goes, and probably quite a bit about how the rest of your life goes. So I need you to be straight with me, both of you. Can you do that? Cole looked at Leah. Leah looked at Mike. Yeah, she said. Why tonight, Mike said. Real answer. I told you, Leah said. My sister. I heard what you said about your sister. I'm asking why tonight specifically. Something happened today. What happened? Leah was quiet. She was 43 hours past the point where lying required energy she did not have. The dialysis center called this morning, she said. Clara is 6 weeks behind on payments. They said if she misses another one, they're going to have to suspend her treatment. And without the machine 3 times a week, she stopped. She swallowed. She dies. It's not complicated. Without it, she dies. The diner was very quiet. Warren Fitch had gotten himself back into his chair at table 9. His hands were wrapped around a coffee cup that Brenda had silently refilled at some point in the last few minutes, and he was listening with the expression of a man who had been forced to entirely recalibrate what kind of night this was. How much, Mike said. Leah looked at him. What? How much does she owe? Total. $4,200, Leah said. The number tasted like something rotting. 4,200, and they'll let her keep the machine. 4,200, and she gets to keep being alive. Mike was quiet. Bobby in the booth said nothing. Declan said nothing. Garrett Hayes, who had moved from his position near the door and was now leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and his eyes open and his mind working with the careful, sustained attention of a man running through something, privately had gone still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. His jaw had tightened. Something behind his eyes had shifted. We got $273 from the register, Cole said suddenly. He was not looking at anyone. His voice had gone flat and honest in the way of a man who has stopped performing. I counted it when I was grabbing it. $273. Nobody responded to that directly. The space between 273 and 4,200 hung in the air of Ali's diner like something visible. You didn't even get close, Mike said, not cruelly. No, Leah said, no, we didn't. And then something happened that she had not expected. She laughed. A short, broken sound that contained no humor whatsoever but that her body produced anyway, because some absurdities reach a pitch that the body must release or implode. $273. She had done all of this, had crossed a line she could never uncross, had put a gun in her hand, and fear into a room full of people who had done nothing to deserve it. And the number in the canvas bag was $273, which was 6% of what Clara needed, which was so far from the answer that it didn't even constitute a direction. God, Leah said, and put her face back in her hands. Hey, Garrett said from the wall. His voice was the same as it had been 3 feet from the revolver, calm and direct and without performance. Look at me. Leah looked up. That feeling you have right now, Garrett said, that's not the end. That's just what the floor feels like from the inside when you've actually hit it. Most people skirt the edges their whole lives and never make contact. They keep themselves just far enough up that they never have to push off from anything real. But you hit the floor tonight, and that means you have something solid to push against. Cole was watching Garrett from the linoleum with the careful attention of a man trying to memorize something. Brenda made a sound behind the counter. It took Leah a moment to identify it as a laugh. And there was a moment brief as a flashbulb where the diner felt almost ordinary, where the fluorescent lights and the burnt coffee smell and the scuffed linoleum were just a diner, and the people in it were just people, and the two holes in the ceiling above them were just two holes in a ceiling, evidence of nothing more than the fact that two very different kinds of decisions had been made in this room in the last 20 minutes. Then Mike Callahan picked up his phone. I need to make a call, he said. While I do that, Garrett's going to stay with you. You're going to stay where you are. He looked at them both. Who are you calling? Leah asked. Someone who might be able to help. Mike said. He walked to the far end of the diner near the windows that looked out on the dark parking lot and the idling semis and the 4 motorcycles standing in their neat row, and he made his call. Leah watched his face in profile. Composed. Serious. Speaking quietly, too quietly to hear across the length of the room. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes is a very long time when you are sitting in a diner in Barstow, California at 2:30 in the morning with a cracked revolver on the table in front of you and the rest of your life balanced on a phone call you cannot hear. Cole leaned toward her from the floor. What do you think he's doing? He murmured. I don't know, Leah said. Should we run? Leah looked at Garrett, who was leaning against the wall with his arms at his sides and his eyes open and his weight perfectly balanced. He gave no indication that he had heard. He also did not move. He did not need to. No, Leah said. We shouldn't run. Cole rubbed his shoulder. I don't like this. Cole, Leah said. 3 hours ago, we were eating gas station sandwiches in your truck and planning to rob a diner with 3 bullets and a Mossberg we bought from a storage unit. Our judgment is not the asset here. Cole absorbed this. That's fair, he said. Brenda came around the counter. She walked to Warren Fitch's table and refilled his coffee. Then she walked to Leah's table and set a cup down in front of her without a word. Then she walked to where Cole was sitting on the floor and set a cup on the table beside him. Cole stared at it. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, Brenda said. I'm not doing it because you deserve it. I'm doing it because I've been on my feet since 3 this afternoon and my back is killing me, and this is the only thing that makes sense to do with my hands right now. She went back behind the counter. Cole picked up the cup with his good arm and drank. Mike came back from the window. He stood at the head of Leah's table, and he looked at her for a long moment, and his face had changed in some way she could not precisely identify, the way clouds change when the wind is settled on a direction. All right, Mike said. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. I talked to someone. Here's where we are. He set his phone face down on the table between them. What you did tonight, he said, doesn't get erased. You understand that. There is no version of tonight where it didn't happen. I know, Leah said. Say it like you know it. I know what I did, Leah said. I know what I put into this room. I'm not trying to make it something it wasn't. Mike looked at her for 3 long seconds. All right, he said. And Leah Danton sat in the silence of Allie's diner with the revolver on the table in front of her and the 2 holes in the ceiling above her and the coffee Brenda had brought her going slowly warm in her hands, and she waited to hear what came next. Mike Callahan did not speak immediately. He had the quality of a man who understood that silence was not empty, that it had weight and texture, and could do work that words could not. And he let it sit between them for a moment, the way a craftsman lets a joint set before testing it. The diner had settled into a strange equilibrium. The fluorescent lights hummed their single sustained note. Brenda was behind the counter again, her movements quiet and methodical, wiping surfaces that did not need wiping because her hands needed something to do. Warren Fitch sat at table 9 with both palms wrapped around his coffee cup, his brochures repacked into his briefcase, his tie straightened, a man who had decided that returning himself to some approximation of normal was the only useful thing available to him. Cole was off the floor now, seated at the table adjacent to Leah, his repaired shoulder rotating slowly in its socket with an expression of residual disbelief. Bobby and Declan had not left the booth. They sat with the easy, settled patience of men who had learned long ago that waiting was not wasted time, but was simply time being used for a different purpose. Garrett Hayes stood near the wall. He was not watching Leah the way a guard watches someone. He was simply present the way certain people are present in a room, fully and without apology, taking up exactly the space they occupy and no more. Here's what's going to happen, Mike said. His voice had the quality of something being constructed as he spoke each sentence, placed with the care of a man who had thought about this during the 4 minutes of his phone call and knew where he was going. The cash from the register goes back. All of it. Right now. Cole looked at the canvas bag on the floor beside him. He picked it up with his good hand and held it out toward Brenda without being asked twice. Brenda came around the counter and took it and opened the register and put the bills back one by one, counting under her breath. $268, she said. 5 short, Bobby said from the booth. Cole reached into his jacket pocket and produced a crumpled $5 bill. He held it up. He looked genuinely mortified in the specific way of a man who has been caught at something and cannot find any angle from which it reflects well on him. It fell out when I was counting, he said. Brenda took the 5. 273, she said. We're square. Mike nodded. Brenda, he said, I'm going to give you a number before I leave tonight. Man named Arturo. He does repair work, good work, fair prices. The ceiling gets fixed, the door frame gets fixed. Everything that got broken in here tonight gets put right. No cost to you or to the diner. You have my word on that. Brenda looked at him. She had the eyes of a woman who had been reading people across a diner counter for 22 years and had developed an accuracy in that reading that she would have called paying attention, and other people might have called something closer to wisdom. She read Mike Callahan for a moment with those eyes. Your word, she repeated. My word, Mike said. Something settled in Brenda's expression. The particular settling of a person who has just decided to believe something and found the decision easier than expected. Then I'll take it, she said. She went back behind the counter. Mike turned back to Leah. Second condition, he said. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Both of you come back here and you spend 4 hours doing whatever Brenda tells you to do. You fix what you broke, you clean what you dirtied, you do it without complaint and without attitude, and you do it right. Not adequately. Right? Yes, Leah said, absolutely. Cole said, yeah. Then more quietly, yeah, I'll be there. Mike looked at them both for a moment. Then he said, third condition. He paused. Let the pause exist. You call your sister tonight, he said. From here, before you leave this building, and you tell her what happened, not a version of it, not an edited version with the worst parts taken out. What happened? All of it. Leah's stomach dropped through the floor of the diner and kept going. She started. Her voice came apart on the single syllable. She collected it. I know what she'll do. Mike said that's the point. You don't understand, Leah said. Clara, it'll destroy her. Finding out I did this, finding out why. Mike looked at her steadily. The truth is, the only thing that has any traction, he said. Anything else just slides. You've been carrying this alone because you didn't want to burden her, and the carrying of it alone is what brought you to this room tonight. She needs to know. More than that, you need her to know. Because the other side of this, the side where things get better, it starts with someone knowing the truth. Leah stared at the table. We clear on all three, Mike said. Clear, Leah said. Cole said clear. Mike sat back. Something in his posture changed, shifted from the formal weight of conditions being laid down to something slightly more open. He picked up his coffee cup, found it cold again, set it down. The man I called, he said. His name is Slade Calloway. You don't need to know more about him tonight than this: he has reach. He has connections to people and institutions that can move certain things when they need to move. I asked him to help with your situation. He's going to look into some options. I can't promise you what that looks like yet, but I want you to know that call was made and that it was made in good faith. Leah looked at him. Why, she said. Mike said what? Why would he help? Why would anyone? We walked in here with guns. We scared these people. We put a shotgun blast through the ceiling twice. Why would anyone make a call on behalf of us? Mike was quiet for a moment. Because I've got a sister too, he said. And he said it with the simplicity of a thing that is just true and requires no decoration. And because I've been in a room where someone made a choice to help instead of hurt, and it changed everything that came after. And because the way I see it, the only thing that ever actually moves anything in the direction it should go is when somebody decides to be the first one to do the right thing, even when nothing is requiring them to. Leah's throat was tight. Cole had gone completely still. He was holding his coffee cup with both hands, the repaired arm and the good one both. Like he needed something solid to grip, and he was watching Mike Callahan with an expression that Leah had never seen on Cole's face in all the years she had known him. It was the expression of a man discovering in real time that the world is not organized the way he had always assumed it was. There are limits, Mike said. This isn't unconditional. If I hear that something like tonight happened again, none of the rest of it holds. That's not a threat. It's just the shape of the thing. Understood, Leah said. Then make the call, Mike said. He stood and walked to the far end of the counter and gave Brenda the number for Arturo, and they exchanged a few quiet words that Leah couldn't hear. Garrett moved to the chair across from Leah, the one Mike had vacated, and sat down in it with the easy, unhurried motion of a man who has nowhere more important to be. She looked at him. You knew, she said, before I said anything, about Clara. Not specifically, Garrett said, but when you came through that door, he considered his words. There's a difference between someone who wants to take something and someone who needs to. The wanting kind, they come in hot, loud. The need kind, they come in afraid. Under the afraid, there's something they're trying to protect. He looked at her. I've seen both enough times to know which is which. What did you see in me, Leah asked. Someone trying to protect something she loves more than she's afraid of consequences, Garrett said. Leah looked at the table. For 6 years, Garrett said, watching my mother in that chair 3 times a week, what it took out of her, what it took out of me. He was quiet for a moment. I would have done a lot of things for her. I understand exactly what a person can get to when the options close down one by one, and the thing you're trying to protect is still there, needing protection. Does it get easier, Leah asked. She wasn't sure exactly what she meant by the question. All of it. Any of it. Garrett thought about it with the honesty of a man who does not give comfortable answers because he does not believe comfortable answers are actually kind. Some things get easier, he said. Some things you just get better at carrying. Leah picked up her phone. It rang twice. Clara's voice came through immediately, sleep rough and sharp, with the particular alarm of someone who has learned over time that late-night calls from a specific number means something has gone wrong. Her voice always knew. It had always known the way sisters know through some channel of communication that exists below language. Leah, she said, it's after 2 in the morning. What happened? What's wrong? Leah closed her eyes. Clara, she said, I need to tell you something. I need you to let me get all the way through it before you say anything. Can you do that? A pause. Yes, Clara said. The word was careful and already braced. And Leah told her. All of it. The phone call from the dialysis center, the 43 hours, the drive in Cole's truck, the parking lot, the bandanas, the shotgun blast through the ceiling, the four men in the back booth who had not moved, the revolver on the Formica table, the moment Garrett Hayes had asked her sister's name and something in her had simply given. She told her about Mike Callahan in the phone call and the three conditions. She told her about sitting in this chair with a cup of coffee Brenda had brought her, not because she deserved it, but because Brenda needed something to do with her hands. When she was done, the phone line between them was so quiet that she thought for a moment the call had dropped. Clara, she said. I'm here, Clara said. Her voice was completely flat, not calm, the flatness of someone running too many things at once for any single register to come through. I just need a second. Take whatever you need, Leah said. No. Sharp. The flatness broke and something fierce came through underneath it. Don't do that. Don't be gentle with me right now. You don't get to be gentle with me right now, Leah. Okay, Leah said. You took a gun into a diner. Not a question. Yes, you pointed it at people. Yes, for me. Her voice fractured on the last word. Just slightly, just at the edge of it. For me. Clara, don't. Don't you dare, Clara said, and her voice was fully fierce now. The gentleness burned away in something raw and bright in its place. Don't you dare make this sound like it was for me. Don't you dare. I never asked you to do this. I never. She stopped. Her breath came through the phone. You think I would rather have the dialysis money than have my sister out of prison? You think that is a trade I would ever make? Leah didn't answer. There was no answer that was not a form of surrender, and she had run out of things to defend. I thought I was out of options, she said finally. You had my phone number, Clara said. That is an option. You call me. You tell me how bad it is. We figure it out together. That is what people do. That is what we do. You have been carrying this alone, so I don't have to carry it, and that is not protecting me. That is just you being alone when you didn't have to be. Her name in Clara's mouth said that way was its own complete sentence. You are my sister, Clara said. You are the only family I have left. The only one. And you almost. She stopped. The silence had a different quality now. Not the flat silence of processing, but the ragged silence of something almost lost. The man who called Clara said after a moment, This Mike Callahan, you believe him, that he's going to help. Leah thought about Mike's face, the patience in it, the total absence of performance. The way he had said my word to Brenda, and Brenda had simply accepted it, because some things you can just hear as true, the way you can hear the difference between wood that will hold and wood that won't before you put any weight on it. Yeah, Leah said. I believe him. Another pause. Longer. Okay, Clara said. The words settled into something found its footing. Okay. Then here's what you're going to do. You're going to go back tomorrow and do exactly what he said. Every single thing. You're going to clean that diner until it's cleaner than it was before you walked in. I will. And then Clara said, we are going to figure out what comes next. Together. Not you alone. Together. Okay, Leah said. But Leah, yeah, if you ever, Clara stopped, gathered herself. If you ever pick up a gun again, for any reason, for me or anyone else. I know, Leah said. I mean it. I know you mean it. A breath. Long and unsteady and then steadying. I love you, Clara said. You idiot. I love you so much. Leah's throat closed entirely. I love you too, she managed. Get some sleep. Call me in the morning. First thing. She hung up. Leah set the phone on the table. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked up at Cole. She okay, Cole said. She's furious, Leah said. She's also the best person I know. Cole nodded slowly. My mom's going to be the same way when I tell her. Leah looked at him. You're going to tell her. Mike said tell the truth, Cole said. He shrugged with his good shoulder carefully. And she's going to find out anyway. She always does. It's like a biological function. Warren Fitch at table 9 had been quiet for a long time. He had the look of a man who had arrived at a decision about something and was waiting for the right moment to say it. He cleared his throat. He said, Miss. Leah looked at him. Warren blinked. He looked at her with the deeply tired face of a man whose handsomeness had settled into something weathered and genuine. I have a daughter. She's 20. She had a heart condition last year. Surgery, the bills. He stopped, organized himself. I'm not telling you your situation is the same as mine. I'm telling you I understand the particular kind of mathematics that medical bills create. The way they change what seems possible, what seems necessary. Leah waited. I'm not going to pretend tonight wasn't terrifying, Warren said, because it was. You pointed a weapon at me and my brain went somewhere I don't want to revisit. He picked up his coffee cup. But I heard what you said about your sister, and I heard what that man said to you, and I genuinely hope it works out for her. I mean that without reservation. Leah didn't know what the right response was. She wasn't sure thank you was the right shape for the moment. I'm sorry, she said instead, for scaring you specifically. I'm sorry for that. Warren nodded once. Yeah, he said. Okay. He finished his coffee. He closed his briefcase. He stood and put enough cash on the table to cover his meal twice over and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. Those men who helped you tonight, he said without turning around, you know what they are. What kind of people? I know, Leah said. Most people would have called the police, Warren said, or done nothing, or made it worse. He was quiet for a moment. I've been driving this highway for 8 years, stopping at this diner. I don't think I understood anything about it until tonight. He pushed through the door. The cold air came in, and then the door swung closed, and he was gone. Brenda watched him go. He always overtips, she said. Good man. Mike returned to the table. He stood rather than sitting this time, which meant something in the posture of a conversation approaching its end. Brenda, he said. She looked up. My friend Slade is going to be in touch with the dialysis center when they open at 8. He's going to work something out. I can't tell you exactly what that looks like yet, because it depends on what the center is willing to do. But he's good at finding arrangements that work for everyone. Leah stared at him. Just like that, she said. Not just like that, Mike said. Because of the call I made and the conversation we had, and the choice you made an hour ago when you put that gun down. That's what just like that consists of. She nodded. There's a motel about a mile east on the frontage road, Brenda said from behind the counter. Sunrise Motor Lodge. Nothing fancy, but it's clean, and Terry, who runs the night desk, owes me about 17 favors. I'm going to call him and tell him you're coming, and he's going to give you a room for the night. Leah looked at her. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to, Brenda said. She said it with the energy of a woman who has made a decision and finds further discussion of the matter inefficient. You're coming back tomorrow at 10. You need somewhere to sleep between now and then. It makes practical sense. Let me do this and we'll all move forward. She called Terry. The call lasted under a minute. She hung up. Room 7, she said. Keys under the mat. Don't smoke inside. Cole had gotten himself off the floor. He was standing under his own power, rotating his shoulder with the careful and slightly awed expression of a man repeatedly testing something he expected to hurt and being surprised when it didn't. He picked up the canvas bag, now empty, the money returned, and dropped it in the trash can near the door. Brenda, he said. She looked at him. He stood there for a moment with his mouth slightly open and his jacket half on and his face doing complicated things. The face of a man trying to find words for something he has not had occasion to put into words before. I'm sorry, he said. I know that doesn't. He stopped, started again. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I mean it. Brenda studied him with 22 years of practice attention. I know you do, she said. 10 o'clock, Cole said. 10 o'clock, Brenda confirmed. They walked out. The parking lot received them with cold air and a silence that was the particular silence of the Mojave, at this hour enormous and clean, and without any opinion about what had happened inside the building they had just left. Leah stood for a moment and simply breathed it. The desert at nearly 3 in the morning smelled like distance and alkaline dust, and something faintly mineral that she had never been able to name, and she filled her lungs with it and let it out slowly and felt something in her chest that was not quite relief, but was adjacent to it, the first softening of something that had been rigid for a very long time. The motorcycles were gone. Of course they were. Mike and the others had moved out while Leah was on the phone with Clara, dissolving back into the dark of the highway, the way they had arrived without ceremony, without announcement. 4 men on 4 machines pointed west into the Mojave night, with the easy authority of people who required no audience for the things they did. They didn't even say goodbye, Cole said. They don't seem like the goodbye type, Leah said. Cole was quiet. He was looking at the empty space where the motorcycles had been the 4 slight rectangles of disturbed gravel, where the kickstands had rested, and his face had the expression of a man trying to memorize something he is not sure he will be able to hold on to. Leah, he said. Yeah, I'm sorry. For tonight. For this whole thing. He looked at his hands. This was my plan. I came up with it, and I talked you into it, and I told you nobody was going to be a hero, and I was wrong about every single piece of it. We both walked in there, Leah said. No, Cole said. His voice was different, stripped of the performative quality it usually carried, the sales pitch readiness. You did it because of Clara. I did it because I owe a man money I don't have and I panicked. Those are not the same reason. He looked at her directly. Your sister could have lost you tonight, permanently, and that would have been on me. Leah didn't argue with him. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do for a person is let them carry what belongs to them. Who do you owe? She asked. The debt. Cole shook his head. Not tonight. I'll figure it out. Cole. Not tonight, he said again, and the firmness in it was not deflection. It was the voice of a man setting a boundary on his own behalf for possibly the first time. Just for tonight, I want to get to that motel room and sleep for about 100 years. They drove the mile to the Sunrise Motor Lodge in silence. The frontage road was rough and unpaved for most of its length, and the ranger's suspension communicated every irregularity faithfully, and Leah sat with one hand on the door and watched the dark desert slide past the window and thought about Clara's voice. You are the only family I have left. The motel was small and low, a single story of 8 rooms arranged in an L shape around a gravel lot with a buzzing neon sign that said Sunrise in orange and a vacancy light that had one dead letter. So it read VACNCY. And it looked exactly like every motel on every frontage road on every interstate in the American interior, which was to say, it looked like shelter, which was exactly what it was. The key was under the mat of room 7 as promised. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and had a Bible in the nightstand drawer and a print of a desert sunset above the bed that was probably intended to be inspiring and mostly just looked like a painting that had seen a lot of people come and go and had long since stopped expecting anything particular from any of them. The carpet was the particular shade of indoor-outdoor brown that existed in motels like this one for reasons of pure practicality and had nothing to say about taste or intention. It was the best room Leah had ever been in. She sat on the edge of the bed and took off her boots and lay back in her clothes and looked at the ceiling and thought about the shape of the last 3 hours. She thought about the parking lot and the canvas bag and the way her hand had felt wrong around the revolver from the moment she picked it up. She thought about Bobby Gallagher reading the situation off her body from across a diner before she had said a word. She thought about Garrett's voice asking what her sister's name was, not as a tactic, not as a manipulation, but because the answer actually mattered to him. She thought about Brenda bringing coffee. She thought about Warren Fitch's pharmaceutical brochures on the linoleum. She thought about Clara's voice saying, "You are the only family I have left," And the way it had landed in her chest, not as accusation, but as the most precise and honest statement of what was at stake, what had always been at stake, what she had somehow turned into a reason to do something terrible when it should have been the reason to do anything but. She was still thinking when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost let it go. Her thumb hovered over the dismiss button for a full 3 seconds. Then she answered. Yeah, she said. Leah Danton. A man's voice, low and measured with a deliberateness about it that was not the deliberateness of someone choosing words carefully in the moment, but the deliberateness of someone who had always spoken this way, for whom precision was not an effort, but a habit. Yes, she said carefully. My name is Slade Calloway, the man said. Mike Callahan asked me to call you. Leah sat up. The name carried weight she could feel before she could explain it, the particular physical response to certain names, the body knowing something before the mind has processed it. Okay, she said. He tells me you're a woman in a difficult situation who made a bad choice and then made a better one. Slade said. He believes the second choice matters. I'd like to think it does. Leah said. It does, Slade said. In my experience, the second choice is always the one that tells you who a person actually is. Anyone can fall. What you do when you're on the ground is the only data that means anything. Leah was listening with everything she had. Cole Baxter, Slade said. He owes money. I know to whom, and I know how much. Leah went still. How do you? It doesn't matter how, Slade said, and his voice was not unkind. What matters is that the debt is forgiven. Effective tonight, the man he owes will be contacted and the matter will be resolved. Silence. Leah's mind was doing calculations that did not add up to anything she knew how to process. Who was this man? How had Mike Callahan made a phone call at 2 in the morning and reached someone who could dissolve debts by declaration? What was the shape of the network that she had stumbled into by setting a cracked revolver on a Formica table? Why, she said, because Mike asked me, Slade said, and because I have my own reasons for valuing the kind of decision you made tonight. Let's leave it at that. A pause. Then the dialysis center will be contacted when they open at 8. My office will speak with the billing department and with the center director. Your sister's account will be brought current. A payment arrangement will be established, 6 months manageable installments. Nothing that should require anyone to do what you did tonight. Leah pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes. Hard. She held that pressure for a moment, steady and deliberate, until the stinging behind them subsided into something she could manage. I don't know what to say, she said. Her voice was almost steady. You don't need to say anything to me, Slade said. What you need to do is become someone who makes the second call first. You understand what I mean by that? Yeah, Leah said. I think I do. Good. He paused. There's one more thing I want to tell you. It has nothing to do with the practical arrangements. Okay. I have a sister, Slade said. Older. She raised me after our parents died. I was 15 years old and she was 19, and she took 2 jobs and never once let me feel like a burden, and never once let me feel like I was the reason her life was smaller than it could have been, even though I was. A pause. When Mike told me that when Garrett asked for her name, you said Clara. Not my sister. Her name. Like she was a person standing in the room with you. He paused again. I recognize that. I understood exactly what kind of person says her name that way. Leah's throat had closed completely. Mr. Calloway, she started. Don't, he said quietly. Don't try to thank me. Just build something with what you've been given tonight. Something real and something that lasts. Make sure your sister knows that her sister is the person she always believed she was. That's all anyone can ask of you. The line went quiet. Leah sat on the edge of the motel bed with the phone in her hand and the desert pressing its enormous silence against the walls of room 7 and the ceiling looking down at her in the desert sunset print above the bed, doing what it had always done, which was exist without comment. A tired painting in a room that had held many people and was simply doing its job. She sat there for a long time. Then she texted Cole. 3 words. You still up? The response came in under a minute. Yeah. Can't sleep. You good. Getting there, she wrote. Three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Same. Hey, thanks for not telling me to run when you had the chance. Leah read that twice. She set the phone on the nightstand. She closed her eyes. Outside, a truck moved through the dark on Interstate 40, its engine a sustained low note against the silence, heading somewhere, with something the way trucks always were. The country's blood moving through its veins at 3 in the morning, while most of the country slept or tried to. She thought about Clara's voice again, the fierce love in it. The way Clara had said, "You are the only family I have left." And it had been both accusation and declaration and forgiveness all at once, the way things are when they are completely true. She thought about Slade Calloway saying you said her name like she was a person standing in the room with you. She thought about what Mike Callahan had said about the only thing that ever actually moves anything being when someone decides to be the first one to do the right thing. She thought about Garrett Hayes standing 3 feet from her with his hands open at his sides, asking a question that had nothing to do with the revolver. She thought about all of it in the order it had happened, the damage, and then the other thing, the thing she didn't have a clean name for yet, the thing that had come after the damage and was still unfolding and did not yet have a shape she could fully see. She fell asleep in her clothes in room 7 of the Sunrise Motor Lodge. It was the first time in 3 weeks that she did not dream about money. Leah woke at 7:43 and lay still for 30 seconds, letting the room assemble itself around her. The ceiling, the buzzing quiet, the smell of industrial cleaner, and the particular stillness of a room that had held many people and retained nothing specific about any of them. Then it came back. All of it in the order it had happened, which was also the order of consequence. The parking lot, the canvas bag, the shotgun blast and the plaster coming down, the 4 men in the booth who had not moved, the revolver on the formica table and her hand still shaped around something that was no longer there. Mike Callahan's voice. Slade Calloway at 3 in the morning making problems dissolve like they were made of something less permanent than she had believed. Clara. Leah sat up. Her back ached from sleeping in her clothes and her mouth tasted like 43 hours without a toothbrush, and her eyes felt like they had been worked over with dry sandpaper from the inside. She felt more alert than she had in weeks. Not rested. Alert. The specific aliveness of a person who has passed through something and is standing on the other side of it and finding the ground solid beneath her feet, at least for now, at least this morning. She got up and washed her face with the motel soap, which smelled like nothing in particular, and accomplished exactly what soap was supposed to accomplish. And she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for a long moment. The red around her eyes, the jaw that needed attention, the face of a woman who had stood at a specific edge in a specific diner in the Mojave Desert and stepped back from it, and who was now looking at herself in a motel bathroom mirror, trying to understand what that meant for the person looking back. She called Clara at 7:51. Clara picked up on the first ring. "You slept," Clara said. It was not a question. She had a particular ability to read Leah's voice that had nothing to do with what was actually said, some channel of information that ran below language. Leah said, "Clara, something happened after we hung up last night." She told her about Slade Calloway, the phone call at 3:30 in the morning, the debt forgiven, the billing department, the 6-month arrangement. She told it plainly and carefully in the order it had occurred because she had made a promise to herself in the dark of room 7 about plain and careful being the only way she was going to speak for a while. Clara was quiet for a long time after. "Leah," she finally said. Her voice had shifted. The fierce rawness of the 2 in the morning call had settled into something quieter, something that was working very hard to stay level and not entirely succeeding. "Who are these people?" "I don't fully know," Leah said. "I know they ride motorcycles, and they stopped at a diner for coffee and onion rings, and they made choices last night that nobody required them to make. Are you safe?" "I'm safe. Are you sure?" "Clara, are you sure?" "I'm sure. The center called this morning," Leah said. "Before you called me. Actually, I thought that was why you were calling. They said my account was being reviewed. that someone from a business office had been in contact about a resolution. Yeah, Leah said. That was because of Mike Callahan. A pause. Because of you, Clara said. Because of what you did last night. Because you put the gun down. I just did what anyone. Leah. Her voice was very steady now, the steadiness of someone who has been crying recently and has made a decision about being done. That is not a small thing. Putting that gun down when everything in you was saying to hold on to it. Don't make it small. Leah looked at the wall where the desert sunset print hung. She had looked at it twice already, and each time it had been a tired painting in a tired room. This morning it looked like something else. Not hopeful exactly, just no longer finished with its work. I'm going back to the diner at 10, she said. I've got work to do. I know, Clara said. Call me when you're done. She paused. Leah. Yeah. Thank you for calling me last night, for telling me the truth, even though it was the hardest thing. Leah's throat tightened. That was the condition, she said. I know, Clara said, but you would have found a way around a condition you didn't want to keep. You kept it because you wanted to, because you knew it was right. Leah didn't argue with that. She hung up and knocked on Cole's door at 8:50. Cole opened it immediately, which meant he had been awake for a while. He was in the same clothes but had wet his hair down, and his eyes had a clarity that had not been there in the truck the night before. Some fundamental cloudiness gone from them, as though the events of the last several hours had burned something off that had been accumulating for a long time. You talk to your mother, Leah said. For an hour and a half, Cole said. She cried. I cried. He picked up his jacket from the chair by the door. She told me about 30 things my father would have said. Some of them were actually useful. Yeah, he used to say the difference between a mistake and a crime is whether you thought it was someone else's problem to clean up. Cole shrugged into the jacket, carefully favoring the shoulder. I used to think he was just talking. They drove back to Allie's diner in the early morning light. The same road, the same parking lot, the same building. But the light changed everything the way light does, removing the dramatic mercy of darkness and replacing it with the full, honest accountability of morning. In the morning, you saw things as they were. The busted doorframe, the two holes in the ceiling visible from the parking lot, the jagged circles of missing plaster dark against the flat white surface. The faded paint on the Alley's Diner sign, the way the letter I had been losing its crossbar for some time now, and nobody had gotten around to fixing it. The highway behind it, wide and already busy with early traffic, carrying people who had no knowledge of what had happened in this building 7 hours ago, and would never have any reason to acquire it. Leah and Cole got out of the truck. They stood in the parking lot for a moment looking at the diner. I did that, Cole said quietly, meaning the ceiling, meaning all of it. We did that, Leah said. Yeah, Cole said. We. He was quiet for a moment. The words seemed to mean something specific to him this morning, the shared ownership of it, the fact that it could not be redistributed. The door opened before they reached it. Brenda Kowalski was already there. She had a different uniform on the night shift's particular exhaustion, replaced by the morning shift's version of it, which was essentially the same exhaustion, wearing a cleaner apron and having slightly more to do. She had a cup of coffee in each hand, and she held them out as they came through the door without ceremony, without preamble, the way you hand someone something they are going to need. Good morning, she said. You're early. Couldn't sleep past 8, Leah said. That's the body telling you it's time to start fixing things, Brenda said. She looked them both over with the appraising eye of 22 years of reading people across a diner counter. You both look terrible. Thank you, Cole said. Supply closet is in the back. Mop bucket cleaning supplies, spare bulbs. The light in booth 14 has been flickering for 6 weeks, and I'd be grateful if someone took a look at it while they were back there. Maintenance keeps saying they'll get to it. She paused. There's a step ladder in the closet too, she said. For the ceiling. Leah looked up at the 2 holes. In the morning light, they were specific and ugly, the plaster ringed with a darkened char at the edges, raw and unambiguous. I can patch plaster, she said. It won't be invisible, but it'll hold until a professional comes through. Good enough for today, Brenda said. She went back behind the counter. The first breakfast customers were already beginning to appear at the door, truckers and highway travelers, and a family with a young child who pointed at everything indiscriminately. Cole was already moving toward the supply closet with the purposeful energy of a man who needs his hands to be busy before his mind has time to catch up with things. Leah watched him go and thought about what that energy was. Not guilt exactly. Guilt was static. This was something with forward motion in it. The feeling of a man who has decided that what he owes, he is going to pay, and who has found a kind of relief in the simplicity of that decision. She got the stepladder and the patching compound Brenda produced from a cabinet in the back and went to work on the ceiling. The work was good, physical and direct, the kind that occupied the hands completely and left the thinking to run in the background at whatever pace it needed. She had done construction before, 3 years of it, in her early 20s before the shop work, and the skills came back with the muscle memory that good physical skills always retain the body knowing things the mind had filed away. She worked the compound into the first hole with a putty knife, building it up in thin layers, feathering the edges, giving it time to set before the next application. Cole mopped every square foot of linoleum twice. He moved around the tables and chairs with a thoroughness that exceeded what anyone had asked of him, getting under the edges, working into the corners. The thoroughness of a man doing something, not because he was told to do it well, but because doing it well was the only version available to him this morning. The booth 14 light took 20 minutes and a screwdriver. Loose ground wire. 23 years of a flickering light because nobody had looked closely enough at the connection. Leah tightened it and flipped the switch, and the light came on steady and stayed there. The breakfast crowd filled in around them as they worked. Truckers at the counter, a pair of highway patrol officers who sat at the far end with their coffees and talked to Brenda about something Leah couldn't hear. The young child at the family table kept pointing at the ceiling patches and asking questions that his parents were deflecting with the practiced ease of people who had learned that deflection was the most efficient parenting tool available in public spaces. The highway patrol officers were there when Leah was cleaning under a table near the window. She was aware of them in the peripheral way that you are aware of things that have the potential to become relevant, not with alarm, just with the steady background attention that the situation warranted. The older one may be 55, broad through the shoulders, and with the patient, unhurried manner of a man who had been reading situations for a long time, walked over. Leah straightened. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he said. He looked at her for a moment with the professional assessment that was simply how men like him looked at things. Not hostile, not warm, just reading. "Those patches up there." His eyes moved to the ceiling. "Yes, sir," Leah said. "What happened to the ceiling?" There was a pause. The length of it was important. Too short and it sounded rehearsed. Too long and it sounded like construction. "There was an incident last night," Leah said. "We're making it right." The officer looked at her. He let the look do its work, the sustained neutral attention of someone who was not in a hurry and did not need to be. "You work here," he said. "No, sir. I'm here making amends." He considered that for a moment. Then he looked at Cole across the diner, who had stopped mopping and was watching with the careful stillness of a man trying very hard to look like someone engaged in ordinary mopping. "Brenda," the officer called toward the counter. He didn't raise his voice. He had the kind of voice that carried without effort. Brenda looked up from the coffee she was pouring. "These two giving you any trouble this morning?" he said. Brenda set the coffee pot down. She looked at Leah. She looked at Cole. She looked at the officer with the full authority of 22 years behind a diner counter on an interstate highway. "These two," she said, "have been here since 9:15 fixing my ceiling and mopping my floors. I would call that the exact opposite of trouble." The officer held his gaze on Leah for another 5 seconds. Something shifted in it, not warmth exactly, but the withdrawal of something else. The removal of a particular kind of attention. "Carry on," he said. He went back to the counter. Leah released a breath she had been holding since he walked over. Her hands had been shaking for the last 90 seconds. She looked at them now and told them to stop, and they mostly did. Cole appeared at her side. That was close, he murmured. Leah said not really. Cole looked at her. My hands were shaking, she said. That's the only part that was close. Cole went back to his mopping. Leah went back to the ceiling. They worked through 9:30 and 10 and 10:30, the diner filling and emptying and filling again, the way diners do on interstate highways in the morning. A continuous tide of people in transit, people between one place and another, people who needed coffee and eggs, and 20 minutes off the road, and then were gone again into the current of the highway. Leah worked through all of it with her head down and her hands busy, in the quiet satisfaction of physical work that was pointing in the right direction. At 11:45, the door opened and Mike Callahan walked in. He was alone. No Bobby, no Declan, no Garrett. No visible patches on his jacket, just a man in his mid-50s, in plain clothes, the kind of man you would not look at twice in a diner on a Tuesday morning, someone stopping for coffee on his way somewhere or nowhere in particular. He walked to the counter and ordered without looking around and sat on a stool and waited for his coffee. Then he looked up at the ceiling. He found the two patches. He looked at them for a moment with the assessing eye of someone who knows what good work looks like and what it does not look like, and knows the difference without having to think about it. Then he looked at Leah. He gave a single nod, small and direct. Leah nodded back. Mike drank his coffee. He took his time with it. He did not come over to inspect the work or ask questions or supervise in any form. He was simply there the way a person shows up to something they said they would show up to, even when showing up consists entirely of sitting at a counter and drinking coffee, because showing up is showing up, regardless of what form it takes. And a person who means what they say does not get to pick the easy version of keeping their word. After 20 minutes, Brenda leaned across the counter and said something to him that Leah couldn't hear. Mike listened, said something back. Brenda laughed, a real one, short and unpretentious, the laugh of a woman who has been given back something small that was taken from her. Mike put money on the counter and stood. He walked toward the door. As he passed Leah's table, he said without stopping, "Check your phone." The door closed behind him. Leah checked her phone. A text from Slade Calloway's number sent at 8 that morning. A name, Wade Pruitt. An address in Apple Valley. A time, 3 o'clock this afternoon. And below that, one line. Good work, steady pay. Tell him Mike sent you. Leah read it 3 times. Then she walked to where Cole was finishing the last section of floor near the back booths. Cole, she said. He looked up. She showed him the phone. Cole read it. His jaw tightened. He blinked twice. He handed the phone back. Something was happening in his expression that moved through several registers in rapid succession. The fast internal processing of a man whose model of how the world works has just been revised without warning and who is trying to catch up. That's a job, Cole said. A real one. Looks like it. Cole straightened. He put the mop handle against the wall and stood with his arms at his sides and looked at Leah with the expression of a man trying to find the right question among the many available. Why is this happening? He said. What does Mike Callahan get from any of this? Leah thought about it. She thought about what Mike had said the night before about the room where someone made a choice to help instead of hurt, and it changed the whole shape of what came after. She thought about Garrett and the years he wished someone had intervened in. She thought about Slade Calloway at 3 in the morning talking about his sister working 2 jobs at 19 and never letting him feel like a burden. She thought about the particular stillness of a man on a highway shoulder in the middle of the night, sitting with the engine idling and thinking about a woman who had said her sister's name like it was the only word that mattered. I think some people do things, she said slowly, not because of what they get out of it. I think some people do things because of who they've decided to be. And being that person means doing the thing, even when there's nothing in it for them, especially then. Cole was quiet for a long time. I've never met anyone like that before, he said finally. Me neither, Leah said. Until last night. They finished at 12:30. Every floor surface clean, the ceiling patched and dried to a texture that was not invisible, but was solid and would hold. The door frame as stable as Leah could make it without proper materials, which was more stable than it had any right to be. The booth 14 light steady on the first flip of the switch. Brenda walked the diner with the critical and practiced eye of a woman who knows exactly what she is looking for and is not going to pretend otherwise. She checked corners. She ran a finger along the edge of a baseboard. She stood in the center of the room and looked up at the ceiling patches for a long moment. Then she walked to booth 14 and sat down in it, which she probably had not done in 23 years because the light had always been wrong. She reached up and flipped the switch. The light came on. She flipped it off. On again. Steady both times. She looked at Leah. 23 years that light has been wrong, she said. Every electrician who looked at it said it needed a full rewire. Loose ground wire, Leah said. Someone just needed to look at it carefully. Brenda nodded slowly. She was still looking at Leah with that reading quality that 22 years of paying attention. You did construction before the shop work, she said. Yeah, 3 years in my early 20s. Why'd you stop? Leah thought about the real answer, which was long and involved a job that ended badly, and a boss who hadn't paid what he owed, and a series of decisions that each made sense in isolation and collectively added up to a situation with no good exits. The kind of story that sounds like excuses when you tell it even when it isn't. Lost my way for a while, she said. Brenda nodded like she understood exactly what that meant, which she probably did because 22 years behind a diner counter on an interstate highway was a comprehensive education in the many ways a person could misplace themselves and the many ways they could find their way back. She went to the register. She counted out something and came back and held it out. $300 in 50s. Leah looked at it. Brenda. Don't, Brenda said. It's not for you. Leah looked up. It's for Clara, Brenda said. Put it toward the first payment. Leah stared at the money. You don't know her. I know enough, Brenda said. I know her sister spent a night making choices for her that almost went very wrong. And I know that when you call her tonight, she should hear that a stranger from Ali's diner on Interstate 40 sent her something. Because I want her to know that something good came out of that night. That not everything that came out of those hours was bad. She held the money out until Leah took it. The hand that took it was not entirely steady. Thank you, Leah said. She said it simply without performance, the way you say the only word available when every larger word has already been used up, and this one will have to carry the weight of all of them. Don't thank me, Brenda said. Just be reliable. She went back to work. Cole was standing near the door with his jacket on, watching. He had the settled, thoughtful expression he had been wearing all morning, the expression of a man absorbing information that is reorganizing something fundamental in his understanding of what is possible. You know what gets me, he said as they walked out. What? Last night I thought the worst thing that could happen was getting caught. He pushed through the door and held it for Leah. Getting caught, getting arrested, losing the ability to keep doing whatever I'd been doing. That was my biggest fear going in. They walked out into the midday sun. And then the worst thing happened, Cole said. We got caught, or close enough, and it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. He shook his head slowly, not with irony, with something more like genuine wonder. Leah thought about that for a moment. That's either very profound, or you hit your head harder than we thought. Probably both, Cole said. Leah laughed. It came up out of her rough and real and slightly startled the laugh of someone discovering that a mechanism they had assumed was broken still worked. It felt like something stored too long, compressed and changed by the storage, but genuine beneath it hers. They stood by the truck. The sun was overhead, and the Mojave was doing what it did in the middle of a clear day, which was everything at maximum intensity, the light absolute and the shadow sharp, and the air so dry it seemed to crackle faintly at the edges. 3 o'clock, Leah said. 3 o'clock, Cole confirmed. You want company? It came from Cole without setup. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, Cole said. He said it in the same rhythm Brenda had used, the cadence of someone for whom don't have to had stopped being the relevant question. Yeah, Leah said. I want company. They got in the truck. Before Leah started the engine, they sat for a moment, both of them, the diner behind them and the highway in front of them, and the desert in every direction doing its enormous patient thing. She thought about the version of herself that had driven into this parking lot 7 hours ago. Same truck, same highway, same desert, different person. Not transformed, not fixed, not resolved. Just standing on different ground, pointed in a different direction. She started the engine. The address on her phone led them 40 minutes east of Barstow, off the interstate, and down a county road that the ranger's suspension engaged with philosophically onto a construction site of significant scale where three crews were working simultaneously on what looked like a commercial foundation project. The noise and organized motion of it were visible from a distance. The yellow machinery and the figures moving with purpose among the concrete forms, the whole complex functioning organism of a large job in progress. Wade Pruitt was in the middle of it. He was approximately 60 years old, compact and deeply tanned from decades of outdoor work, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead that appeared to be entirely decorative. He had blueprints in one hand and a phone in the other, and he was giving instructions to two different people at once, with the economy of a man who had been doing this for a very long time and had learned that calm was the most efficient form of authority available. He saw them coming and ended both conversations simultaneously, the clean, decisive ending of someone who does not trail off. "Leah Danton," he said. "Yes, sir," Leah said. He looked at her with an assessment that was direct and impersonal. The assessment you give a structural element when you need to know if it will hold weight under load. He was not reading her character or her history. He was reading her capacity. "Mike called me this morning," Wade said. "I don't get many calls from Mike." "I figured," Leah said. "When he calls, I listen. He told me you know construction. He told me you're at a turning point. He told me you'd show up on time." He paused. "You showed up 40 minutes early." "I didn't know the roads," Leah said. Wade looked at her. "Good answer," he said. "Bad roads, and you still made it early. That tells me something specific." He looked at Cole. "Who's this?" "Cole Baxter," Cole said. "I'm with her. You do construction. I do whatever needs doing. I'm a fast learner." Wade studied him for 3 seconds. "Mike mentioned you." "No, sir. So you just came." "He needed company," Cole said simply. "And I didn't have anywhere better to be." Wade looked at Leah. "He always liked this." "Honestly," Leah said, "I'm seeing a new side of him today." Something shifted in Wade Pruitt's expression. The precursor to a smile, the territory just before it. "I've got 2 openings," he said. "Foundation work to start framing later in the week. It's early mornings, and it's physical, and it pays honest. If you're both here Thursday at 6, you've got jobs." He looked at Leah directly. "Mike says you know plaster work and electrical basics." "Yes, sir." "Then Thursday at 6, you're not on the foundation crew," Wade said. "You're with Kerner on the interior team. Better rate." He was already turning back toward his work. Then he stopped. One thing he said without turning around. "Yeah," Leah said. "Whatever you did to get Mike Callahan to call me at 8 in the morning, Wade said I don't need to know the details, but I need to know it's behind you." Leah did not hesitate. "It's behind me," she said. Wade walked back into the organized motion of his construction site and was absorbed into it immediately, back on his phone, blueprints rising in his hand, the machinery of a working day, closing around him the way water closes over something dropped into it. Leah and Cole stood at the edge of the site and watched him go. "Thursday at 6, Cole said finally. "Thursday at 6, Leah confirmed. "That's 2 days from now. I can count Cole." "I'm just saying," Cole said. He looked out at the crews working at the shape of something being built from bare ground up. "2 days ago, I couldn't see Thursday. I couldn't see past the next bad decision. And now I can see it. Specifically. Thursday at 6 in the morning, standing at this gate." Leah put her hand on his shoulder for a moment. "Just briefly, just enough. Let's go call our families," she said. They drove back toward Barstow on the county road and then onto the interstate, and the highway was wide and clear in the early afternoon light, and the desert ran alongside them in both directions with its ancient indifference to human difficulty and human resolution alike. At 1:53, her phone rang. Unknown number. She recognized it now. "Ms. Danton," said the voice on the line, low and measured, the same deliberateness as before. "Mr. Calloway," Leah said. "I hear you went to see Wade." "Word travels fast," Leah said. "Wade texted me when you left." Slade said, he said, and I'm quoting directly, "Mike's person showed up early, answered straight, bringing them on Thursday." A pause. "I want you to understand what that represents," Slade said. "Wade Pruitt has been in business for 30 years. He has never once hired someone he didn't know personally or hadn't watched work with his own eyes. What Mike's endorsement accomplished, what you showing up early and answering without evasion accomplished, is something that does not happen on a normal Tuesday in the normal course of things." "I understand that," Leah said. "Do you? Specifically? Because I need you to understand it specifically, not in a general way." His voice was not sharp. It was the genuine insistence of a man who needed a real answer. "What happened last night and what happened this morning and what is going to happen Thursday," Slade said. "This is a chain. Each link holds because the one before it held. Mike vouched for you because you put the gun down. My office called the dialysis center because Mike vouched. Wade hired you because Mike's word was the key. Every good thing that comes after Thursday exists because Thursday held. You break one link and the chain is worth nothing. You understand what I'm telling you?" "Yes," Leah said, completely and specifically. "Good." A pause. "I told you last night that I had a sister, that she raised me." "Yes." "What I didn't tell you is that I spent 3 years after she raised me doing things that could have destroyed everything she sacrificed for. 3 years of decisions that could have landed me somewhere there was no Thursday morning to look forward to." He paused. "Someone chose not to make a call they could have made. Someone decided that what I needed was not a consequence that ended things, but a consequence that pointed forward. That person is the reason I'm on this phone with you today instead of somewhere else entirely." Leah was quiet. "When you said her name, Slade said Mike told me how you said it. Not my sister. Clara. Like she was in the room. I recognize that. The way a person says the name of the one they're fighting for." He paused. "That kind of person is always worth the call." Leah turned her face toward the window. The desert outside ran flat and bright and indifferent in every direction, the kind of landscape that holds everything and judges nothing. She held that view for a moment until she trusted her voice again. "Mr. Calloway," she said. "Build something," he said. "That's all. Build something real with what you've been given today. That's the only thanks I want." The line went quiet. Cole was watching her from the passenger seat with the careful, full attention he had been paying to everything all day. "That was him again," Cole said. "Yeah. What did he say?" Leah thought about the chain of links and Clara's name said the right way, and a man who had recognized something in her because he had once been something like her, and someone had made a choice not to end things for him. He said, "Build something," Leah said. Cole sat with that. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." They were coming around a long curve on the interstate when she saw them. On the westbound shoulder, 4 motorcycles parked in a row. Mike Callahan, Bobby Gallagher, Declan Reed, and Garrett Hayes, all standing outside their bikes with their helmets in hand facing east. Facing the direction she was coming from. Like men who had pulled over for a reason, and the reason was this. "Is that Cole started?" "Yeah," Leah said. "Are they?" "Yeah." She pulled the truck to the eastbound shoulder. Across the median and 40 feet of interstate, and the constant noise of highway traffic, the two groups looked at each other in the bright afternoon light. Mike raised his hand. Leah raised hers. It was not a wave. It was not a greeting in the ordinary sense. It was the gesture of two people who have occupied the same room during something real and carry that room with them. Now the way certain rooms travel with you after you leave them in the structure of what you decide and who you decide to be. Garrett Hayes cupped his hands around his mouth. Thursday at 6, he shouted across the traffic noise in the desert wind. Leah stared at him. How do you know about that? She shouted back. Garrett grinned. It was the first time she had seen him grin fully and without reservation. And it was a good one, wide and genuine and belonging to a man who was considerably warmer than the controlled stillness of the night before had suggested. Wade's been our contractor for 12 years, he called back. He texts us when interesting things happen. And Leah laughed. She could not help it and did not try to. It came up out of her like something pressurized, finding its release real and loud and slightly helpless, the laugh of a person encountering the specific absurdity of a world that turns out to be smaller and more connected than you believed, and simultaneously far more willing to be generous than you had any right to expect. Cole started laughing too, and for 30 seconds on the shoulder of Interstate 40 outside Barstow, California, in the full unambiguous light of a Tuesday afternoon, the two of them stood and laughed at the sheer unlikely architecture of it, the way one decision in a diner at 2 in the morning had rerouted the geometry of everything that followed, the way a name said correctly could be the thing that changed the direction a life was pointing. Bobby Gallagher across the highway shook his head, but he was smiling. Declan Reed put his helmet on. Mike looked at Leah one last time, and in that look she received something she understood without needing it explained. The passing of something, the releasing of it, the particular communication of a man who has handed something off and is now satisfied that it is in the right hands. He put his helmet on. One by one, the engines came to life, each one a deep, sustained note that built on the one before it, until there were four of them running together, a sound that was loud and steady, and somehow in some quality she could not name, precisely, profoundly unhurried. They pulled out westbound into the afternoon into the Mojave, the four of them riding at the same pace with the same ease, the desert opening around them without limit. Leah watched them until the last set of taillights curved out of sight. Cole put his hands in his pockets. They got back in the truck. They drove without talking for a while, the highway straight ahead, and the afternoon burning clean on both sides. Leah took the exit for Barstow and drove through the familiar streets and turned onto Garfield Avenue, where the Riverside Dialysis and Kidney Care Center was located, in a low beige building set back from the road with a small parking lot and a sign she had driven past so many times that she had stopped seeing it. She pulled into the lot and sat for a moment. Cole looked at her. He didn't ask. He understood what this was. She got out of the truck. The lobby was standard medical facility, waiting chairs along the walls, and a reception desk, and the particular institutional smell of places where people came regularly for something they could not live without. The woman behind the desk was maybe 40, efficient, and not unkind. Leah walked to the desk. She set the $300 on the counter. Brenda's 50s, each one place flat. Clara Danton's account, she said. I want to make the first payment. The woman looked at the money, looked at Leah. Are you a family member? Her sister Leah said. The woman typed something, looked at her screen. A payment arrangement was set up this morning through our billing office. She looked up. The first installment would be scheduled for the 15th. I'd like to make it today, Leah said. In person. Now. The woman looked at her for a moment. Then she took the money and counted it and entered it into the system and printed a receipt and slid it across the counter. Leah took the receipt. She stood in the lobby of the Riverside Dialysis and Kidney Care Center on Garfield Avenue in Barstow, California, and she looked at the piece of paper in her hand. Clara Danton. Account number. Payment received. Date and time. No gun, no canvas bag, no cracked revolver in a waistband, and no bandana over her face, and no 43 hours of no sleep driving her toward a bad decision. Just $300 and her sister's name and a walk across a parking lot she had done entirely by herself. She folded the receipt and put it in her jacket pocket. She walked back out into the afternoon. Cole was leaning against the truck. He looked at her face when she came out, and he nodded once slowly, like something had been confirmed that he had been waiting to see confirmed. They called their families. Clara answered before the first ring finished. Well, she said, tell me everything. And Leah told her. The construction yard. Wade Pruitt, who read her like a structural element and decided she would hold weight. The text from Slade that had made Cole stand in the middle of a construction site, recalibrating everything he thought he knew about how the world worked. The highway shoulder and four motorcycles parked facing east, and Garrett Hayes cupping his hands and shouting across 40 feet of interstate about a contractor who texted when interesting things happen. She told her all of it, and Clara listened without interrupting, which was not how Clara usually listened. And when Leah was done, Clara was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Thursday at 6, she said. Thursday at 6. And Cole's going too. Cole's going too. Okay. A breath. Okay, Leah. I need you to hear something. I'm listening. Whatever comes next, Clara said. Whatever happens Thursday and after Thursday and a year from now and 10 years from now. I need you to remember that last night you put a gun down when you didn't have to. When everything in that room was pushing you toward holding on, you put it down. Remember that when it gets hard, because it is going to get hard. That's just what life does. But you already showed yourself something about who you are when it counts. And then Brenda sent me $300. Leah smiled. She sent it through me. She what? Clara made a sound that lived in the territory between words and crying, and Leah sat with it because some sounds don't need a response, they just need to be received. Tell her, Clara said when she could speak again. Tell her it already meant something. It already mattered. I will, Leah said. She hung up. The afternoon was long and clear, and the desert held its ancient silence on all sides. The silence of a place that has seen everything and kept it, and has no opinion about what you intend to do next. Leah sat in the truck and looked out through the windshield at the road in front of her, and felt the receipt in her jacket pocket, the specific small weight of a piece of paper that had Clara's name on it, and a date and a payment made. Cole's mother was on the phone with him for 45 minutes. Leah could hear the tone of it, without the words, the difficult parts, and then the parts that were something else entirely. When he hung up, his eyes were red at the edges. She said, my dad would be proud, Cole said. He looked out the window. I'm going to try to make that true. Leah pulled out of the parking lot. The drive back to the Sunrise Motor Lodge took 12 minutes. The same frontage road, the same rough surface, the same low building with the VACNCY sign buzzing in the early evening. But the distance between the person who had checked in the night before and the person pulling back in now was not 12 minutes. It was something measured in different units entirely. They ate at a roadside place near the motel hamburgers and coffee and talked about practical things. What time to leave Thursday morning to make Apple Valley by 6? Whether Cole's truck would survive the county road without suspension damage. What kind of boots were right for foundation work? The ordinary logistics of a life that had acquired a next step, a concrete forward thing to point at and move toward. Leah slept in her clothes again, but this time by choice. The room looked the same. The desert sunset painting still hung above the bed. The Bible in the nightstand drawer was still there. She called Clara one more time before she slept, just to hear her voice, just to say goodnight. Clara answered on the second ring, groggy and warm. You okay, Clara said. Yeah, Leah said. I just wanted to say goodnight. A pause that had nothing difficult in it. Good night, Clara said. First thing Thursday you call me. First thing Thursday. She set the phone down. Through the thin walls of the motel, she could hear the highway, the sustained presence of it, trucks moving through the night. The country's business continuing without pause or acknowledgement. The great indifferent motion of a nation going about its life, while Room 7 held one woman who had decided something about herself in the last 24 hours and was still learning the shape of that decision. Leah Danton closed her eyes. Thursday came. She was at the gate of Wade Pruitt's construction yard in Apple Valley at 5:47 in the morning. Cole was already there, standing beside his truck with two coffees, one of which he held out without saying anything, because some things had moved past the point where words were necessary. The morning was cold, and the sky to the east was the particular pale color that precedes the sun. Not yet light, but no longer dark, the sky of a world in the act of deciding. The construction site was quiet at this hour, the machinery still the concrete forms casting long shadows across the bare ground. Wade Pruitt arrived at 5:59. He pulled into the lot and got out and saw them both standing at the gate, and he looked at them for a moment with the same assessing expression he had used the day before, the expression of a man checking whether a structural element holds up on the second inspection the way it did on the first. "Good start," he said. He unlocked the gate and they walked through it, and the workday began. It was ordinary and physical and loud and completely real. No guns, no bandanas, no desperate arithmetic in a parking lot at midnight. Just work. The straightforward, honest, daily dignity of people who show up when they say they will and do what they said they would do and carry their own weight without asking anyone else to carry it for them. At lunch, Leah stepped away and called Brenda. "It's Leah," she said. "First day. I wanted to let you know." "I know," Brenda said. "Wade already texted me." Leah laughed. "Does everyone in the Mojave text each other about everything?" "Only about the things that matter," Brenda said. "How is it?" "It's good," Leah said. And she said it with the full, unqualified simplicity of two words that were exactly true. Nothing added and nothing held back. "It's really good, Brenda." "Yeah," Brenda said. "It is." She hung up. Leah stood in the pale winter sun of the Apple Valley construction yard, with the sound of real work all around her, and the receipt for Clara's first payment in her jacket pocket, and Thursday morning solid and unambiguous beneath her feet. She went back to work. Clara kept her machine. The 6-month arrangement held. The number stayed manageable. The machine ran 3 times a week, every week without interruption, and Clara kept living with the full force of a woman who has been given back time. She had quietly feared she was running out of who uses every minute of it, who calls her sister every Tuesday evening, not because she needs anything, but because it is the thing they do now, the thing they chose together on the far side of the worst night either of them had ever had. Cole Baxter never missed a Sunday call to his mother. He showed up every morning before the gate opened. He did the work without being told twice. After 6 months on Wade's crew, he was promoted to site lead on a residential project in Apple Valley, a development of 14 homes on land that had been empty for years. Wade, when asked later what had decided it, said only that Cole showed up, did the work, and didn't need to be told things twice. Cole's mother put that in a frame on the wall of her kitchen where it stayed. In Ali's diner on Interstate 40 outside Barstow, the ceiling was properly repaired 6 weeks after the incident by a man named Arturo, who charged nothing and did meticulous work, the kind that left no evidence anything had ever happened except a section of plaster slightly newer than the rest, which nobody ever noticed. The diner served coffee and eggs and meatloaf through the days and nights, the way it always had open to whoever came through the door, keeping its lights on for anyone still out there on the highway who hadn't found where they were going yet. On the counter near the register, Brenda kept something she had never kept there before. A small piece of Ali's diner order paper folded once 3 lines in Leah's handwriting. "Clara says it already mattered. It already meant something. Thank you for making sure something good came out of that night." Brenda never threw it away. Some things you keep because they are proof of something you need to be able to prove. Not to anyone else. To yourself. Proof that a night that could have gone the worst way it could go instead went the only way that made any lasting sense. Proof that the floor is not the end. That the floor is something to push off from. That the most powerful thing a person can put down is not always the weapon in her hand. Sometimes it is the story she has been telling herself about who she is. And sometimes the moment she puts that down, everything changes. Out on the highway, the desert holds its ground the way it always has. Patient and enormous and without preference. The trucks move through the dark, the stars do what stars do over the Mojave, and somewhere west of Barstow, on a clear night, you might see 4 sets of headlights running together at a steady pace, unhurried, pointed toward the horizon, carrying men who stopped for coffee once and ended up doing something else entirely and never felt the need to explain it to anyone. They rode on. The desert opened around them without limit.